Stepmom asked me to cancel the wedding so my stepsister could marry my fiancé, but I chose my happiness instead. I'm 25. Growing up, my life wasn't exactly a fairy tale. My mother's battle with alcoholism cast long shadows over my childhood, filling it with uncertainty and chaos. I remember nights spent listening to her stumbling around our house, mornings where I had to get myself ready for school because she couldn't get out of bed. The instability was constant, like living on quicksand, never knowing when the ground might shift beneath your feet. My father fought hard for custody, and winning it was probably the best thing he ever did for me. He wasn't perfect, no parent is, but he tried. He worked long hours to provide for me, attended every school event he could, and always made sure I knew I was loved. When he met Bate, my stepmother, I thought our family was finally complete. She brought stability, order, and her daughter Brooke into our lives. Brooke was 2 years younger than me and had been born with a neurological condition that made her life considerably more challenging than mine. From the beginning, our relationship was complicated. I understood why she needed more attention, more care, more everything, but understanding something logically doesn't always make it easier to accept emotionally. I remember one particular incident when I was 14. I just won first place in the school science fair, a project I'd worked on for months. When I came home, excited to share my achievement, Bate barely acknowledged it. She was focused on Brooke, who was having a bad day. My blue ribbon ended up stuffed in a drawer, my excitement deflated like a balloon pricked with a pin. That became a pattern. My achievements somehow always seemed to get lost in the shadow of Brooke's needs. Looking back, I can see how those early years shaped my personality. I became a peacekeeper, always trying to smooth things over, to be understanding, to put others' needs before my own. I learned to dim my own light so others wouldn't feel overshadowed. It wasn't healthy, but at the time, it seemed like the only way to keep the peace. Then I met Ryan. It was at a coffee shop near my office, so cliché, right? I was 22, rushing to get my morning caffeine fix before a big presentation. He was the barista who misspelled my name so badly on my cup that I couldn't help but laugh. His sheepish smile when I pointed it out made my heart skip a beat. That coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into movie nights, which turned into 3 years of building a life together. Ryan was everything I'd never known I needed. He was patient when I was anxious, strong when I felt weak, and most importantly, he saw me, really saw me, in a way no one else ever had. He was also incredibly good with Brooke, which initially made me happy. He had this natural way with her, always knowing how to make her laugh or calm her down when she was overwhelmed. I remember watching them interact at family gatherings, feeling grateful that my future husband could connect so well with my stepsister. When Ryan proposed, it felt like everything in my life was finally falling into place. The ring wasn't expensive, we were both still building our careers, but it was perfect. A simple solitaire diamond that caught the light just right, like a star you could wear on your finger. I started planning our wedding with the kind of enthusiasm only a bride-to-be can muster, creating Pinterest boards, comparing venues, and dreaming of our perfect day. But as the wedding preparations progressed, I started noticing subtle changes in Bate and Brooke's behavior. It began with small things, Bate making dismissive comments about my choices, suggesting that maybe we were rushing things, questioning whether we could afford the wedding we were planning. Brooke became more withdrawn, refusing to participate in any wedding-related activities, even though I'd asked her to be one of my bridesmaids. I tried to be understanding. I knew change could be difficult for Brooke, and I figured Bate was just being protective of her. But then the comments became more frequent, more pointed. Bate would make remarks about how Brooke had never had a serious relationship, how unfair it was that some people seemed to have everything come easily to them. The tension in our family grew thicker with each passing week. Then came that evening, the one that would change everything. I was sitting in our family room talking to my mom on the phone. Despite her struggles with alcohol, we'd maintained a relationship, and she was one of the few people who seemed genuinely happy about my engagement. Bate walked in just as I was hanging up, and something about her expression made my stomach clench. She sat down beside me, her hands folded in her lap, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The conversation that followed felt like something out of a bad dream. Bate, the woman who had been my stepmother for over 15 years, the person who had helped raise me, was asking me to give up my fiancé for my stepsister. She didn't phrase it that way, of course. She wrapped it in concern and false kindness, talking about how Brooke needed Ryan more than I did, how he was so good with her, how it would be the selfless thing to do. "Think about it," she said, her voice taking on that persuasive tone she used when trying to sell someone on a difficult idea. "Brooke has never connected with anyone the way she connects with Ryan. You're young, pretty, you could find someone else. But for Brooke, this might be her only chance at happiness." I sat there, frozen, as the full weight of what she was suggesting crashed over me. She wanted me to cancel my wedding, to step aside and watch my fiancé be manipulated into a relationship with my stepsister. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. "Are you even hearing yourself?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "You want me to give up the man I love, cancel my wedding, and what? Just hope that Ryan decides to date Brooke instead? This isn't some romance novel where you can just swap out the leading characters." Bates' face hardened. "You're being selfish," she said, her true colors finally showing. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by refusing to consider what's best for Brooke." That's when something inside me snapped. Years of trying to be understanding, of dimming my own light, of accepting second place in my own family, it all came rushing to the surface. "What's best for Brooke?" I stood up, my hands shaking. "What about what's best for me? What about my happiness? I love Ryan and he loves me. We're getting married and there's nothing you can do about it." The aftermath of that conversation was like a bomb going off in our family. I didn't speak to Bate for days, avoiding family dinners and dodging her calls. My father, when I finally told him what happened, tried to minimize it. "You know how Bate gets when it comes to Brooke," he said, attempting to smooth things over. "She didn't mean anything by it." But she had meant it, every word, and his dismissal of the situation only made it worse. When I finally told Ryan, his reaction validated everything I was feeling. He was furious, not just at the suggestion itself, but at the manipulation, the complete disregard for our relationship and happiness. "They're crazy if they think I'd ever go along with something like that," he said, holding me close as I cried. "We're getting married, nothing and no one is going to change that." The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense. Bate and Brooke attended the necessary events, but there was an undercurrent of hostility in every interaction. Brooke would barely look at me and Bate's smiles never reached her eyes. I caught them whispering together at the rehearsal dinner, stopping abruptly when I approached. But our wedding day was beautiful despite their attempts to cast shadows over it. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, my eyes locked with Ryan's, and in that moment nothing else mattered. Not Bates' tight-lipped disapproval, not Brooke's obvious absence from the bridal party. She refused to be a bridesmaid after all, not any of it. Ryan and I exchanged our vows, surrounded by friends and family who truly supported us, and it was perfect. The aftermath, though, was difficult. I had to come to terms with the fact that the family I thought I had wasn't really my family at all. Bate and Brooke tried to reach out after the wedding, acting as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't pretend anymore. The mask had slipped and I'd seen what lay beneath. I set boundaries, firm ones. I limited my contact with them, keeping our interactions civil but distant. My father wasn't happy about it, but for once I stood my ground. I explained to him that while I would always love him, I couldn't maintain close relationships with people who had tried to manipulate and control my life in such a fundamental way. The years since then haven't been easy. There have been family events where the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, holidays where the absence of warmth was palpable. But Ryan and I have built our own family, surrounded ourselves with people who genuinely care about our happiness and well-being. Looking back now, I realize that standing up to Bate and Brooke was about more than just protecting my relationship with Ryan. It was about finally recognizing my own worth, about refusing to be the person who always sacrificed their happiness for others. It was about understanding that real family, whether related by blood or not, supports your dreams rather than trying to steal them. Sometimes I think about that conversation with Bate, about how differently things might have turned out if I'd been the same people-pleasing young woman I'd been before. But I'm not that person anymore. That evening, as painful as it was, taught me an invaluable lesson. Your happiness matters, and anyone who tries to convince you otherwise doesn't have your best interests at heart. Ryan and I celebrated our third wedding anniversary last month. We had a small dinner party with friends, people who have become our chosen family. As I looked around the table at the laughing faces, the genuine joy, I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd found the strength to stand up for myself, grateful for the love Ryan and I share, and grateful for the understanding that sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. My relationship with Bate and Brooke remains distant but civil. They've never apologized for what happened, and I've stopped expecting them to. Some wounds don't heal completely, but they do scab over, becoming reminders of battles fought and won. I've learned to accept that not every story has a perfect ending, but that doesn't make it any less worth telling. In the end, this isn't just a story about family betrayal, it's a story about finding your voice, about standing up for your happiness, and about learning that love doesn't require you to diminish yourself for others. It's about understanding that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead us to where we're meant to be.